Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Cooking with Grief, the internet's only comedy/culinary remorse podcast, apart from our heated rivals, those dicks over at the Souffling with Remorse podcast. I'm Chris, and as always I'm joined by my brother from an entirely different mother, the co-host with a co-most, Jenny from the block but Chris from the suburbs. It's Chris!
Hi there.
How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. I did my usual pre-podcast moisturiser, so I'm all ready to go.
Oh, nice and moist.
Moistness is what you need with a podcast, I've learned, I guess. So here's how the podcast works. Each of us, two Chris's, gobble up a few news nuggets, process them in our chat factory, and present them to you with a choice of free dipping sauce. Please don't spit them out, it's just rude. Chris, what have you got for us this episode?
Okay, Chris, so I'd like to talk about a topic which is close to your heart, sodomy. But
that is an allegation that I want stripped from the record.
And what I actually meant was ancient Greece.
I hope no one I know listens to this podcast because they will find out that I am a fan, but of ancient Greece. Carry on.
What I'd like to talk about is the Peloponnesian War. As always, I like to keep things topical and up to date.
You're breaking news on the Spartan front.
Yes. So, as you are obviously aware, the Peloponnesian War was a war between Athens, who were head of the Delian League, and Sparta, who were head of the Peloponnesian League.
I obviously know that.
Obviously. And since they'd decided to start with the weird sports metaphor, I'd like to talk about some rather spectacular own goals. Because, honestly, this war was just full of backfires and, as I said, own goals. And it's long enough in the past that even though thousands of people died, it's kind of funny. So, to begin with, Athens, Sparta, whatever reason, probably some complicated geopolitics involved, but let's just say it was a dick measuring contest. They decided to get all fighty with each other.
You know, slow down, Professor. I think if you could use the layman's term.
Yeah, so the first thing was the Spartans were obviously, as 300 taught us, badass warriors, and the Athenians were much better with the navy. So what happened was the Athenians basically decided that they'd blockade the Spartan ports, and the Athenians retreated behind their city walls, using the fact that they could defend the walls and keep a supply line to the port. Their plan was to just basically starve Sparta out.
Yeah, wait it out, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, so they could get plentiful supplies from across the Mediterranean, and they starved the Spartans and their allies, whilst the Spartans went around just sort of rampaging around the countryside, killing peasants. Which obviously then led to the peasants to flee behind the Athenian wall, but again, Athens was fine with that because they had all this grain. The own goal, however, was scored by the fact that they took in a load of grain shipments that were infected with the plague. And because they'd blockaded Sparta and its allies, they didn't get any of this tainted grain, which meant that the Athenians all basically, like a large proportion of Athenians, just sort of died of plague, allowing the Spartans to, do what Spartans do and rampage a bit.
I was in a band called Tainted Grain.
What genre was that?
Rural. A lot of rural vibes.
Own goal number 2. So after, so again, that sort of shifted the balance in Greece, because plague will do that to you. So the Athenians came up with a cunning plan where they figured they still had naval superiority, so they thought, why not double down on that and invade the next biggest naval power in the lands, which was Syracuse in Sicily. Only that went horrifically wrong and they all died again, which meant then that the Spartans just invaded and took over Athens.
A classic own goal.
Yes, exactly. So if you're keeping score, that's 2-0 to the Spartans, both of which were own goals by the Athenians. And then the final own goal was, despite what 300 would have you believe, it turns out the Spartans were very happy to accept money from the Persians to fight other Greeks. So they did. So the Persians basically paid the Spartans to rampage around Greece some more. But what the Athenians did was they sort of incited rebellion amongst the slave populace that Sparta had, and bribed the allies and stuff, and basically stretched Sparta so thin that the main thing about Spartans was the fact that they had a small number of very badass soldiers. But if you only have a small number of badass soldiers, they A, can't be everywhere at once, and B, when they die, they're kind of hard to replace. And so basically the Persians paid the Spartans to, or helped fund the Spartans' rampage. That spread them too thin. The Athenians then were able to defeat the Spartans. Both sides were very weak, and then the Macedonians, under Alexander the Great's dad, swept through and took over all of Greece, and then later the Persian Empire. So yet another, you could class as 2 own goals.
Do you think Alexander the Great's dad resented being known as Alexander the Great's dad?
Yeah.
And not a man in his own right?
Philip of Macedon, he gets to be called, which is much less impressive. Although it's kind of his own fault. He shouldn't have given his child the middle name of the Great. He brought this on himself.
Big fan of mild cheddar he was, and then they just spelled it wrong. So, we're going to stop sighing audibly in our topics.
You're the one who made a cheese joke.
That's true, it was a tad cheesy. So are you telling me that the accurate historical document of 300 isn't quite as accurate as that documentary would have us believe?
Not as accurate as you'd hope. Although weirdly, it's oddly accurate if you accept that it's Greek propaganda. Apart from the bit about the sodomy. That's the only bit that doesn't really make... Like, again, if you take it as, like, propaganda from Sparta, so they get to be like, we definitely fought millions of people, and they definitely had monster zombie rhino things, and stuff like that, then it's surprisingly accurate, like, tonight we dine in hell and all that, or real quotes.
And the arrows blocking out the sun, that's at least reported in Xenophon? Question mark?
No position to correct you. But yeah, the only bit that don't make sense was the bit where they say, and we may have mentioned this before in another episode, but the bit where he says about Athenians being boy lovers, as if the Spartans weren't all about that side of things.
For them it wasn't love though, it was physical training. It
still involved some, the way it's said implies that the Spartans only stick their penises in ladies, and that, the survey says, was a lie.
I mean, what a round of family fortune that was. Killed Les Dennis's career.
Or was it Stephen Harvey for any American listener we have?
Yeah, Family Feud. Which one do we call it?
We've got Family Fortunes.
Yeah, they call it Family Feud.
We're like Family Fortune, and they're like Family Feud.
It's the difference between an optimist and a pessimist, or American telly and British telly.
Yeah.
When, as exciting as it gets for us, that someone's scones, and yes, it's pronounced scones, didn't quite rise properly in round 3 of Great British Bake Off.
Yeah, that's true.
The modern Battle of Thermopylae was... Jason against his scones.
Not going to rise to the bait.
No.
So yeah, I think having transitioned rather smoothly from Thermopylae to Bake Off, I think we can safely say we've exhausted our Greek knowledge.
In the same way that all roads lead back to Rome, all my knowledge leads back to baked goods. The road to Bakewell is paved with good intentions and half a glacé cherry.
I had a Bakewell tart today.
Congratulations. How was it?
Delicious. Homemade. Not by me.
Oh. Good. I'm definitely keeping that bit in. So, Chris, we've been to ancient Greece. Where are you going to take us for topic number 2? Well, I was going to start this topic by asking, now that we've been doing this podcast for a while, what you thought our recurring themes are, but it's become immediately clear that obviously mostly what we talk about is ancient Greece. Mm-hmm. So we're staying there because we're nothing if not predictable. I want to talk about Diogenes of Sinope, who was, as far as Greek philosophers go, a bit of a badass / annoying prick, depending on how you think of him. But I'll tell you some of the things he did and see what you think. His most famous quote is, "In a rich man's house there is no place to spit but his face."
Did he not like the rich then?
He wasn't a fan of people with wealth. He was invited to a rich merchant's house who must have looked down on him because he asked him not to spit on the floor, so he spat in his face instead.
Dick move.
A bit of a dick move. So far, more of a dick than a badass. Mm-hmm. So basically, he's a sort of hermit philosopher dude who didn't like material possessions. For a while, all he had to his name was a drinking bowl, but then he saw a kid drinking from a puddle with it, like, from his cupped hands, so he decided, I clearly don't need the luxury of a bowl either, so he scrapped that. He lived in a barrel in a market.
Like Oscar the Grouch.
Essentially, yeah. In the Sesame Street of ancient Greek life, he would often masturbate in public and
What?
piss on people who insulted him. So,
But his idea of an insult would, by the sounds of it, would probably be, "Will you please stop masturbating in the street? Don't you dare insult me."
get out that wank barrel and go home. He'd walk around during the day with a lantern at times and said that he was looking for an honest man in a sort of pointless public stunt of David Blaine of his day sort of thing. Now that I'm saying this out loud, there's a lot of ticks going in the just a bit of a dick column rather than an actual badass. I'm starting to rethink this slightly. Apparently, Alexander the Great was a big fan of him. Alexander the Great visited him and offered him any favour, and Diogenes asked him to move slightly to one side because he was blocking his light.
It's a poor choice, but it was his choice.
Yeah, for a philosopher, he's a bit of an idiot. He could have had money or a house other than a barrel. He was a contemporary with Plato, and when Plato defined a man as a featherless biped, Diogenes brought him a plucked chicken and went, "Hey, it's Plato." You know, not a bad joke for the day.
No.
In his will, he specified his body be thrown into the woods so wild animals could eat him.
That's fair.
Which is eco-friendly, if nothing else. You know, it's giving something back to the wild animals, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
And according to legend, he died because he got bored of life and just held his breath for too long.
Like a dolphin.
He willed himself to death like a dolphin. So actually, now that I've read it all out loud, I'm thinking...
More dickhead.
Just a weird dick.
Back then, you could just be a weird dickhead, and apparently that was enough for a job. For somebody who didn't like rich people, I assume he didn't really offer much to society apart from being like, I think about stuff. So he was presumably sponsored by some patrons. As I say, we've gone full circle now, because now, thanks to social media, you too can just do weird shit on the internet and become famous.
These days, instead of calling it a philosopher, they call you
Influencer.
Yeah, cultural influencer.
Yeah, please follow us on Twitter. Cooking with Grief.
You shameless whore. You look down on a man who wanks in a barrel, and then you're pleading for them to follow us on Twitter. Please follow us on Twitter, @CookingWithGrief.
No G on cooking. Yeah, I have no shame.
That is modern equivalent of wanking in a barrel.
I'm pretty sure the modern equivalent of wanking in a barrel is just wanking in a barrel.
You make an excellent point. So that's the first of my two topics. Chris, please tell me you've got something else other than ancient Greece, and we could move slightly more into the present.
Yes, we could, however, make a joke about Greece and Grease, as in, like, lubrication.
Tell me more, tell me more.
Oh, Jesus. I knew something like that was coming, and yet it still took me by surprise.
You knew what Thai joke I was going to make, and I still managed to disappoint you. It's the basis of our friendship.
Yes. I am going to talk about cooking, though.
Ooh.
So it was that type of grease that I was referring to. So, what's your opinion on eating meat?
Well, I was vegetarian for a few years as a teenage Buddhist, but I did have days off when school dinners involved bacon. So I was the worst vegetarian in the world. My deeply held, morals were suckered by a bacon sandwich, so...
Well, would you eat a bacon sandwich if that bacon had never actually been part of a living animal?
Sort of grown artificially in a lab?
Exactly.
Yes, if it was the same price, or cheaper.
It's good to know how far you're more. I could solve all these problems, but not if it gives me even the slightest bit of financial hardship.
If it's a penny more or doesn't taste exactly the right thing, then no, I would rather slow bleed the pig myself.
You know what's really weird is apparently it was... I mean, he won't have been the only one, but Winston Churchill predicted this. But yeah, so he in 1931 apparently said the human race would one day escape the absurdity of growing a whole chicken in order to eat the breast or wing by growing these parts separately under a suitable medium.
Or he's more of a thigh man.
Now a company in San Francisco has been able to grow chicken nuggets that were grown from the cells of a chicken feather, and the chicken is still alive. The chicken that donated its DNA, I say donated as if it had any choice whatsoever. Although, to be fair, given the choice of give me a feather or I'm going to cut your head off and pluck you and cook you, it made the right choice. But yeah, apparently the chicken in question is still around, and they just grew the nugget itself.
And how does it taste?
Apparently it does taste like chicken. according to the
but most things
article.
do, to be fair.
That's true. Tasted like chicken, but it was texture was a little bit softer.
Nah, I don't
Apart
want
from
it.
that, apparently even the skin was crispy.
I think it's interesting because I think there will come a point in this century when, particularly the Western world and particularly America, will have to wean themselves off so much beef.
Mm-hmm.
Eating that much beef isn't feasible. And I know there's a few different... You always see a segment on like daytime sort of news-ish programs where they'll make a burger out of part meat, part insect. And they get to try and go, oh yeah, it tastes like meat. And I go, yeah, because it's half meat.
Well, what's interesting though is because it's not actually from an animal. There's a debate. I've seen that it's definitely in the Jewish community. I assume probably having similar conversations in the Islamic community about whether or not it's kosher or halal, because the whole point of that was that it refers to the slaughtering of the animal rather than the meat itself, and stuff coming from unclean animals and whatnot. They're debating whether or not theologically whether or not it meets the criteria. What's weird is because the reaction people always have will be, it's not natural. And there's a quote in the article where somebody says, so basically there's cattle industry and stuff in America is another, food producers are arguing that it shouldn't be allowed to be called meat because it's not from an animal. But yeah, then there's some quotes where people say stuff like, I like the idea of God's creation, we don't like the idea of man's creation and creating havoc. I want something natural, not processed in a lab. It should should be grown out on the farm, in the field, all that stuff. But the thing is, modern meat is so far removed from that straightforward process of animal, kill animal, cut up animal, eat animal. Cows are given hormones, antibiotic cocktails.
Government subsidies.
Well, yes, but they tend not to eat those. That would ruin the farm. Where's that government subsidy? It's been eaten.
But what I mean is, it's an unnatural step in the process that makes it an even further step removed from it's not like, here is this steak from this cow directly to the table. It's also way cheaper than it should cost to
do so.
Raise that animal.
Yeah, well, it's that thing where just the amount of food, the reasons why it's so bad for global warming and stuff, the meat industry, is just partly because you have to grow so much vegetables and stuff to feed all your cows alone. Just makes it an inefficient process.
You watch these documentaries that everyone says you should watch, and it's like seeing a sad charity advert juxtaposed between two catchy bingo jingles. It affects you slightly for a bit, and then you think, oh, I do really like carbonara though, and it's like there is, logically, if you think it through, there is absolutely no justifiable reason to eat meat. Given that everything we know about it,
and the fact that we have the technology to now replace it.
Yeah, but until that's mainstream, then
not just that. I mean, obviously you've got all the other meat substitutes, the corns and stuff.
What I didn't know is if you're allergic to penicillin, you can't have corn.
Ah, because it's a fungus.
Because it's made from a fungus, and I found that out when I made my flatmate a corn lasagna, and his face blew off. Well, not literally. Not literally.
Like he died.
His face just blew up like a balloon, and we had to call the whoever deals with that sort of thing. Ambulance, that's it.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd be struggling for that. You had to call the people. International rescue.
The plague doctors, I don't know.
And with that out the way, it's over to you, Chris, to close us out.
We live in a world of clickbait news where the headlines offer something slightly appealing, something to distract from the tedium of being.
Which is in no way how we came up with our episode titles.
We're not above it. We try and find the most interesting topic or, certainly the most searchable one, and we lead with that.
Mm-hmm.
And, but we try to do it in a way that's balanced, that actually reflects the content you're about to hear. And then sometimes you see a title and it's sort of clickbait, but it's just too good. You think, I sort of want to know about this, and I fell victim to it because I saw the headline: "Goats addicted to human urine airlifted out of national park."
There's a lot to unpack in that headline.
I gotta click that. I gotta know more. So, goats in the Olympic National Park in Washington State in northwest USA have become addicted to human waz.
When you say addicted,
well,
how does this manifest itself?
I say addicted because they get hooked on the salt and plentiful minerals available in human fluids. From, obviously,
It's just like the Bear Grylls of the goat world.
yeah, sort of goat grills, a nice kebab shop available in my local area. Actually, there is a place that opened up in my town. Like it's a like a grilled chicken place, and it's called Bear Grylls. And I don't know whether it's like a youthful street, like
Right,
we've got Bear Grylls,
we've got Bear Grylls,
or
mate.
is it like Bear Grylls themed? Are they survival kebabs?
There's only one drink on the menu, and it's piss.
Yeah, it closed down really quick. I don't know why. It's hard to get through the door with all the goats pressed against it. But to go back to the story, the reason having goats addicted to piss is bad is because once enough of them got hooked on it, in this national park, they've got an overpopulation problem with the goats to begin with, and then they started harassing, hikers, and then the main problem became is when people set up camp, and obviously, if you're out in the wilderness, you've got to go wherever you can go, then goats would start digging up the ground and tearing up the ground, and it apparently is enough of a problem to justify airlifting them out and moving them to a nearby forest.
Surely they just go mental when they're in the forest, desperately looking for more piss.
See, I knew I was right to click on this headline because it ends up with you saying sentences like going mental for more piss. I think they just let them go cold turkey or cold piss. I don't know what the equivalent of. I've had many addictions in my life, but was minerals is not one of them.
Yeah, some addictions are just a step too far.
It's been 5 years since I've had a drink because, not to get too personal, I struggle to drink in moderation. At no point, even in my lowest moments, did I think I will take the edge off my cravings by just with a warm pint of what you hope is apple juice.
Oh.
Oh yeah, that was too far. Yeah, that was actually too far. I apologise. I really hope someone was drinking apple juice listening to this bit, in which case, sorry, and we understand why you've unsubscribed. I don't know what happens to them after that. I guess they just let them sort it out, or
just wean themselves off.
You got to do it gradually. It's like giving up smoking. If you try and do it cold turkey, it's a lot harder than if you just reduce.
It's like that scene in Trainspotting with the baby on the ceiling.
but it's goats in trees.
Yeah, just
trying to
piss.
I know they're trying to tap into sap just to get anything sweet, and spare a moment for the poor mountain rescue people though.
Oh yeah.
The amount of training that's gone into that, and they thought they'd be helping people, and instead you've got a piss-crazed goat swinging below you. They have to blindfold it as well, so it doesn't panic, not so that it can find its way back. It's like hostages being blindfolded in the van.
We were worried that if it knew where it was going, it would run the 400 miles across country.
Yeah, it's doing it right. We took a left, right, and then flew for a bit. So that's it for another episode of Cooking with Grief. We've done 2 topics each, and now, like all good things, we must leave you and then come back again in a bit if you want us to.
Which we hope you do.
Yeah, that'd be nice. We will inevitably have more ancient Greek half-remembered stories.
There'll almost certainly be some bodily fluid-based humour.
And I might get distracted by a silly headline.
Yes.
And if nothing else, that's what we can promise you. So thank you for listening. I've been Chris.
I have been Chris as well, but not the same Chris.
And I think both of us will continue to be Chris's for some time until I can work up the courage to change my name to Doomhammer.
Wait until we change it from Cooking with Grief by Chris and Chris to Cooking with Grief by Doomhammer and Thunderhawk.
Oh yeah, I got top billing.
It's alphabetical.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, we don't have that problem at the minute. Right, good. Thank you for listening. Hope you listen to the next one, and we'll speak to you again soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cooking with Grief. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to recommend it to a friend. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email cookingwithgrief@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter. That's @cookingwithgrief. If you'd like to hear more episodes, then please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you've got the time, then it'd be great if you could leave us a review on iTunes. Thank you.